are lucky enough to have Sean Prive joining us. Sean works for the Understory Initiative and has led a lot of programs in the region that focus on various understory plant conservation efforts. Sean has a pretty long history with plant survey in Oregon, Washington, and California. Sean is a really great ecologist as well, or in addition to being a great botanist. So I'm going to turn the mic over. Sean's talk will focus on TUI's rare plant program that's in collaboration with the Forest Service and BLM. Thank you again for joining us, Sean.
Yeah, thanks, Vanessa. And thanks to you and Rachel for inviting me. This is a good opportunity for us to get the word out about this new exciting program that we're launching this year. And I'm really excited to make a meeting. I always intend to make more of these, so this is fantastic. So as Vanessa said, my name is Sean. I am a plant ecologist / botanist at the Understory Initiative. And some of you may be familiar with our organization. We're a pretty new nonprofit in the area. We're based in sort of the Medford-Ashland area, though some staff members are kind of scattered around the region. And we started in 2018, really got going in 2019. And the original impetus for the organization was to help boost the capacity of the region to produce more native plant materials, in particular native seed. And so we've advanced programs in that direction. Vanessa's been integral to that, really getting some farmers in the area growing native seed, and we're getting more and more seed mixes online for restoration projects as well as for private landowners. Just anyone who's interested in seeding areas with native seed, creating pollinator habitat. We've been making progress in that direction and are really ramping up those efforts. And sort of simultaneously, and maybe lesser known to folks I know, we've presented in the past, I believe, to the Siskiyou chapter about our native seed projects. But maybe less known to folks, we've also been doing some rare species monitoring, particularly for Cook's lomatium in Josephine County, and are also sort of ramping up those efforts to do more monitoring around the success of restoration activities, rare plants and native plant communities in general under different circumstances. And to that end, I'm here today to introduce you to a particular program that we are launching to hopefully support those exact efforts and to hopefully get some of you involved and just more of the public involved in general in monitoring rare plants in Southwest Oregon. So if this sounds a little bit, I'm hoping this is really informative and interesting and that sort of thing. If it sounds a little bit like a pitch and a recruiting effort, it kind of is. So selfishly, I'm hoping some of you are interested in this. Hopefully some folks who have a background in botany or natural resources, data collection, and hopefully some folks who are brand new to that sort of thing and just want to get their feet wet a little bit. Oops. There we go. So in particular, I'm here to talk about a program that we're starting that we're calling the Rare Plant Monitoring Network of Southwest Oregon. And this is a new effort that we started brainstorming in 2020, specifically with Forest Service botanists. And this sort of came out of our efforts to monitor Cook's lomatium, as I mentioned. And we started to get the sense that there was a lack of updated records for a lot of rare plants that occur in Southwest Oregon. And as I'm sure many of you know, our region is rich with rare and endemic species, the populations of which often go unvisited for years or decades even. And so we started to recognize that need and talk with Forest Service and BLM botanists about the need and started writing agreements, developing agreements. We're still developing more agreements, hopefully to build on this program in the future. And we spent the last year developing monitoring protocols and some framework for getting folks integrated into the system so that all of you and whoever's interested could go out and collect data and become part of this project. So specifically, some of our objectives for this project are to work with agency botanists on federal lands in particular to identify plant populations that are maybe they haven't quite gotten to the point where they're listed as threatened or endangered. Some of those species usually those species get a lot of monitoring attention and management activity. And not necessarily common native plants, but some of the plants that are in between. Maybe that we suspect that they're declining, but they have a lot of populations that have only been visited once or twice and that are actually recorded in a federal database. Those are the types of plants that we want to identify. We want to work with agencies to figure out where those populations are, where the greatest need is, where we might suspect that populations could be declining. And when I say declining, I mean potentially there are fewer populations than there were in the past, or the populations that do exist are shrinking in numbers or are threatened in some way. So we want to identify those populations. We want to revisit those plant populations and determine whether they're still there, first and foremost. And if they are, we want to get some baseline data about the status of the population in terms of spatially, how large is the population, how many subpopulations are there within each population or subpopulation, how many individual plants are there. And then we want to record, and I think this is arguably the most important component of this, we want to record habitat data so that we get a sense of threats that might be potentially in the future shrinking these populations or degrading these populations. And so we have a protocol in place to collect data, to record habitat characteristics, including threats like invasive species, potentially different things that we see that might be indicating that climate change could be a threat, trampling, OHV use, poaching, excessive livestock trampling or grazing, those sorts of threats. We want to record those. And the federal agencies do have really high quality databases for managing information and storing that information long term. They just need people out there populating the databases so that we can know what's going on, and that we can compare data from year to year. So that's the general gist. And if anyone has questions, I think you can put them in the chat, and Vanessa will let me know, because I'm more than happy to answer questions as we go or at the end. So this year in particular, we are working in the Fremont-Winema National Forest, which is sort of this area outlined in green, sort of to the south and east of this map. The Umpqua National Forest, which is sort of to the north and west, outlined in green, and then the Cascade-Siskiyou National Monument, which is outlined in yellow in the southern portion of this map. As most of you probably know, there's also, I don't know if that popped up for everyone else, but I had to close that poll again. As most of you probably know, there's a lot of other national forest land and BLM land in the area. For the BLM, we're just focusing on the Cascade-Siskiyou National Monument for this year. For the Forest Service, our efforts, if we organize events or if we as the Understory Initiative go out and do surveying or monitoring, we're going to focus on these two national forests that I have outlined here and the Cascade-Siskiyou National Monument. Most of you probably recognize that a lot of this other green area on the map is the Rogue River Siskiyou National Forest. And if there are folks interested in going there, organizing some monitoring efforts on that national forest, that's fair game. We just probably won't be devoting as many resources to that. And that is because we were told by forest botanists that there's a planning effort underway that is already completed for the Rogue River Siskiyou National Forest, but we're hitting it at just the right time for the Umpqua and the Fremont-Winema National Forest, so that the data we collect over the next 2 or 3 years will directly make it into this planning process and very much elevate the conservation priority of any species that we find to be threatened or declining. And that's why it's really critical that we get these data and we get as many populations monitored as possible over the next 3 years, so that we can make that timeline and elevate the conservation priority of these species. What I've been told is that if there aren't high quality data, or if populations haven't been visited since say 1993 or something like that, they don't rise to the top. It's kind of considered that there isn't high quality data or science backing the decision to elevate them as conservation priorities. And that's not really my wheelhouse to speak to why that is or what the processes are, only to advocate that we do get out there and collect data so that the science and the information is current and is elevated, and so that some of these species get the attention that they need, because we do have reasons to believe that they have declined over the last 2, 3, or 4 decades since they were first visited. So that I can actually talk about native plants here and not just the background and the protocols that we'll use. I actually wanted to share a few of the plants that we'll be focusing on this year. And I was going to start with I think 3 plants that occur in the Fremont-Winema National Forest. I'm hoping to pique some interest and maybe get people excited about these species. The first one is the Mount Mazama Colombia, which is Colombia mazama. And a couple of us went out and sort of scouted some of these populations last summer, was able to take some pictures. There's a range map in the bottom right-hand corner from the Oregon Flora Atlas. So this is an endemic plant to the Southern Cascades. It occurs in, I think, 3 national forests, but largely in Crater Lake National Park and the Fremont-Winema National Forest. There's a lot of monitoring that's occurred in the national park, so we kind of have a sense of what's going on there. But in national forests, there's almost no information on the trends of this endemic plant. And so we don't know whether it's threatened by potentially some of the wildfires that have moved through the area, or if maybe those wildfires actually benefited this plant. It seems like it's maybe a plant that could actually decline as forest stands become overstocked due to past forest management activities or fire exclusion, that sort of thing. We're just not sure exactly. So collecting baseline data to help track this species into the future will be highly valuable. It also, some of the populations are very undefined, so there might be very large polygons in the National Forest database. So it might just look like, well, it occurs in this really broad area, but we don't know specifically smaller subpopulations where they occur and how many plants are within those populations. So we'll be focusing some effort on this. It occurs in really beautiful areas. It's a beautiful plant. So this one's really exciting. This is Arnica viscosa, Shasta arnica. And this one I'm looking forward to, especially because it occurs in alpine habitats, mostly in the Southern Cascades of Southern Oregon, going into Northern California, especially at Mount Shasta. And it looks like there are some populations in the Siskiyous, high elevations in the Siskiyous. I've never seen those, so I'm unaware of that, but it is on the range map. Apparently it does occur there. And this plant occurs at high elevations, like above the tree line in rocky scree or just rocky areas in general. And we think it could potentially be threatened by climate change as snowpacks decrease, as summers become hotter and drier. We would expect it to potentially try to go up in elevation over time. But a lot of these peaks, it's as high up as it can go. This picture I took last year on Pelican Butte, and I want to say that's up around 8,000 feet, right at the top of the mountain. Doesn't really have anywhere else to go up. Anecdotally, the population looked really healthy up there right now, but we just don't know if we continue to have hot, dry summers, low snowpacks, what's going to happen. So we're hoping that we establish baseline counts and spatial data for this species and current conditions. And so that we could track that with some statistical rigor over the next few years to determine for sure whether or not it is declining. The species occurs a little bit farther east. I wanted to get an eastern representative from the Fremont-Winema National Forest. This is Castanea chlorotica, and it occurs in sage steppe or maybe open pine forest or juniper forests in central Oregon. We'll be going and looking at this in Klamath County or Lake County. I'm excited. I've never seen this plant and I haven't done a whole lot of work in its habitat. So this one's really exciting. And it may be one of the ones that we actually think I don't know overall if it's benefiting or increasing in number or extent, but it seems anecdotally as though it maybe benefited from some of the fires we've had recently. So that's sort of the give and take of increased fires, increased fire intensity, even climate change at times can benefit some species, even though it's dramatically detrimental to other species. So this may be one that is actually doing better because of recent fire, opening up its habitat, lessening encroachment from junipers or other conifers, but we're not sure. So we want to establish some data for this one. This is a complete list of our focal species for 2022 and probably the next few years in the Fremont-Winema National Forest. Don't feel like you have to write any of these down or anything, but if you're interested in any of these, if anything jumps out at you as you look at this and you think, you know what, I'd be willing to drive out and potentially hike a little bit to go see this and count them and report back. If one of them just looks like it'd be a whole lot of fun to go see, you can either join us or you can, I'll talk more in the end here about how you can volunteer, but don't feel like you have to write these down right now. If you're interested in one of them or a couple of them, you can contact us and we'll get you this list so you can pick one potentially. Then in terms of the Cascade-Siskiyou National Monument, I just wanted to highlight two species that we'll probably be focusing our time on, especially as Understory Initiative staff, but there are plenty of other species that are rare and endemic in the monument. This one is Limnanthes flacosa subspecies bellingeriana, Bellinger's meadow phone. We'll probably be out monitoring this fairly soon because it's sort of a mid to borderline low elevation annual, early season annual that occurs in vernal pools or other seasonally wet spots on the landscape. It's also endemic to Southern Oregon, although it does cross the border over into Northern California a little bit. But most of the plants, most of the populations occur right in our area on the sort of the western flanks of the Cascades. I think we're going to see, just from the scouting that we did last year, I think we're going to see that this plant is threatened by climate change and drying of vernal pools, especially from lowered snowpack and lowered spring and winter rainfall. Last year, it looked like the plants just, again, anecdotally, were very small. We're not having a lot of success producing seed. And since it's an annual, it is reliant on producing seed every year to continue the population. So this is one that we're going to want to keep an eye on, and it's been elevated within the Cascade-Siskiyou National Monument for monitoring priority. And I'm sure some of you are familiar with this plant. This is Calochortus greenii, Green's Mariposa lily, another endemic to our area, really centered around the Cascade-Siskiyou National Monument. Most populations occur right in that area. This is a perennial wildflower in the Liliaceae, grows back every year from underground bulbs, and flowers relatively late for its kind of low-ish elevation habitat. Usually occurs in really hot, dry chaparral, savanna sort of ecosystems, but doesn't flower until June or July. So we'll be out there this year, probably monitoring lesser known populations. Some of you may have been to the Mariposa Lily Preserve in the monument, and I know a lot of work has been done there, research and monitoring and habitat improvement efforts. We're probably going to try and get out to some of the lesser visited populations and see how they're doing. This is another one that may be actually increasing. There's, I don't know if there's direct evidence, but some people are guessing that could happen as the climate becomes warmer and drier and potentially more habitat is opened up that's suitable for this plant, but we just, again, we don't know. And that's kind of a theme for a lot of these is a lot of these have, you know, just one snapshot in time in terms of what their populations look like. And we're hoping to improve that. This is a list of all the species we're going to focus on in the Cascade-Siskiyou National Monument. Again, no need to write any of these down or anything, but if something jumps off the screen at you or you want to see this list again, feel free to reach out to us and we can get that to you. And I'm not going to include the Umpqua National Forest in this just for the sake of time, and because this group is mostly focused closer to the Medford-Ashland area. But if you're interested in going to the Umpqua National Forest or you just want to know more, reach out about that as well. I can let you know. So just to get everyone a sense of what if you did want to volunteer for this program or you're just curious, a sense of what our methods are going to be like, and whether or not you should feel intimidated by this, by the data collection effort. I just want to give a couple snapshots of our data sheet, and then I also wanted to show you some screenshots of the app that we'll be using. And I really want to try and steer people toward using the app that we didn't develop the app, but we developed the sort of the platform and the spatial information and the forms that you would fill out on your phone. And I think it's become extremely user-friendly. So I wanted to give you a sense of the paper data sheet that you can be equipped with, that you could go out and collect data with, but also know I'm going to show screenshots of the app pretty soon. I'm very excited about it. I want to stress that it will be very user-friendly and save a lot of time and resources in terms of data entry and quality control. So just keep that in mind. But either way, we get the same data either way. And this paper data sheet would show you that we are going to collect information on plant counts, just what you would expect, how many plants are there, whether that's an estimate or not, what method you use to come to that conclusion, a description of how the plant population is doing, general habitat description. There's a lot of checkboxes here in the app. There are drop downs. And then there's a lot of space to just take notes. If you can successfully ID the associated species, if you can give some habitat details, especially what we're most interested in is these threats. And this continues on. These are just screenshots of part of this data sheet. But we really want to know about these threats, and there's different selections that you can make here. And then there's space to write detailed notes about any threats that are observed in the area. And then again, the same exact information, if you or anybody chooses to use this app, the same exact information goes into the app, but it's so slick. And I really want to advocate for this, even if not for this program or project. If you have any similar data collection needs for anything you're working on, or you just want to try it out, highly advocate for this. And I would be more than happy to talk to anyone one-on-one about how to use it. But essentially, if you sign up for this, if you download this app and sign up for the program, we can set you up with the database. The database will just pop onto your screen for wherever it is that you've signed up to go. And you will see these orange polygons, which are the known or the previously documented locations of these rare species. And then you'll have the ability to draw your own polygon over the top of the old one, or in a new spot if the population shifted. And you can draw that either by walking the perimeter of the population or just by drawing it with sort of this crosshair symbol. And then when you draw a polygon around where the population occurs, you click done. And when you click done, a form comes up, and there's a lot of drop downs to select the same thing that was on that paper data sheet, and then areas where you can take notes. And then at the end of the day, you go back, get on Wi-Fi or a reliable cell network, and you click sync, and then I can see it on my computer at home, and it's all entered. No data entry required, and it's very easy for everybody. And again, if you want to learn more about this for this program or other programs, I'm really excited about this. This particular app is called Input, and then all the forms and spatial information that you would receive on this are made on a desktop computer by whoever is administering it. In this case, me. So advocating for that. So that's basically a snapshot of what we're hoping to do today. We're hoping to get a handful or more people out on the ground, including our staff members. And then we're hoping to expand this. Potentially, we're already writing proposals to expand to more of the Medford District BLM and continue on at the Forest Service. We want to invite volunteers from other counties. If you live outside of sort of the Jackson-Josephine County area, especially Klamath or Lake County or Douglas County, we're hoping to recruit volunteers from those areas. If you know of people who might be interested, send them our way. We would like to identify more species in more areas that need this type of monitoring, but really we want to boil it down to the species that need the monitoring the most and need the consistent long-term monitoring so we can really establish trends, probably the ones that are showing evidence of declining. And then we also have this, and I'm going to wrap up here. It looks like I got just a few more minutes. We have this idea of potentially partnering with the Oregon Bee Atlas. They do a lot of really high quality, well-organized bee survey efforts, group volunteer efforts, camping trips. We would like to kind of pull from their model and do a lot of the same things with this program for rare plants, but also partner with them and see if we can start to describe unique bee species or potentially rare bee species that might be specialists on the rare plants that we're monitoring. We think that might be the case with certain taxa, more so than other taxa. And there are certain genera and families that draw specialist bees more often than others. So that's something to check back in on. Maybe in a couple of years, we can report back and do another one of these presentations about that effort. So that's something that I'm excited to hopefully do in the future. And then we also want to collect seed from certain species so that we can conserve the seed for the future. If these populations do unfortunately decline, we can hopefully plant them back out onto the landscape, integrate them into restoration efforts. So we're hoping to also collect seed from select species. And I didn't put on here, also collect herbarium voucher specimens. Some of these don't have any herbarium voucher specimens at this point, or vouchers. So that's another thing that we would like to do. And that is about all I have. Hopefully I got the timing right, but I did want to, the last thing I wanted to do is let you know how you can volunteer if you are interested. The first way is if you're feeling very adventurous and you feel like maybe you have some botany skills or some natural resources skills, data collection skills, especially some backcountry and forest road navigation skills, and you can navigate to some of these populations either on your own or you could buddy up with somebody. You can sign up for a training event that we're doing on April 8th. And if you can't make April 8th and you feel like you fall into this category, we'd be more than happy to set up another training. So reach out to us if you do fall into this category. And we can set you up with the spatial data, with the forms and everything that you need, and maps, everything you need to sort of adopt one of these populations and hopefully go back for the next few years and check up on it and do the counts so that we can establish high quality data for species that you might be interested in. Maybe you've never seen that species, or maybe you have seen it in the past and you've fallen in love with it and you want to know how it's doing. If you feel like you're qualified for that, you're feeling adventurous, sign up for our training on April 8th or reach out to us so we can set up another training. And the easiest way to do that is to go to our website, understoryinitiative.org, and then go to understoryinitiative.org/rare plant, all one word. You can just Google search some combination of that, the Understory Initiative and Rare Plant Program. You'll find it that way too. And there's a form there where you can sign up. And the second way that you can volunteer for this program is to just come to a group event that we'll be hosting. We'll be announcing a series of group events shortly, at least one in conjunction with Native Plant Society with the Siskiyou chapter that Rachel has kindly volunteered to help coordinate. And also in conjunction with the OSU Extension Land Stewards Program. And this, we will train you at the event. You don't necessarily need to have any experience. Experience would be great, and you could help lead the event or lead folks who are really inexperienced if you do have a little bit of experience. But the great thing about this is that we'll announce where it is, check our website, and check the newsletter from the Native Plant Society. So we'll announce those soon, this year and next year. And you can just sign up and we'll tell you where to go, where to meet, and then we'll train you up on the plant that we're surveying for that particular day and how to use whatever it is. You'll probably just help us with counting at that point, unless you want to do more of the other data collection. I think that's all I have. Hopefully that was good timing, and I'd be more than happy to take questions.
Thank you, Sean. We have some questions in the chat, and I think a pressing one from Heidi Anderson is the location of the April 8th session.
Yes, good point. Thank you. I should have said that. It is going to be at the Sampson Creek Preserve, and the Selberg Institute has generously allowed us to use their facilities at the Sampson Creek Preserve, which, if you're not familiar, beautiful location just southeast of Ashland, just a few minutes outside of Ashland, just past Immigrant Lake. And that will be from 9 o'clock to 1 o'clock on April 8th. And we will be doing an indoor presentation to show you how to get set up with the app and how to use the app. And then we'll be going out on the ground, probably not monitoring a rare plant since there's not one easily within walking distance, but we'll be finding a native plant there or several. Again, really beautiful spot. We'll find some cool plants to look at, and we will go through the monitoring protocol with a native plant that occurs near the facility there.
So if I recall, Sampson Creek's actual address, I think is difficult to use in Google Map. So if folks can contact the email that Sean, and I put it in the chat, Maggie at understoryinitiative.org. Maggie is another person at TUI that will be coordinating this program. She will put you on an email list so you can get the correct information to get to Selberg if you haven't been there before.
If you sign up, we will make sure that you know how to get there, and it's really close to Ashland. So we'll get you there. And I should have mentioned Maggie is going to be integrally involved in this program, and she's going to be the sort of the overall coordinator, probably the person that you interact with the most, unless you get to the point where you're really working with data, collecting data, and submitting data, in which case you'll probably be working more closely with me, but we'll both be very involved in this program.
Yep. Maggie's a delight. So I think our first comment from Madrone just reads, I live north of Roseburg, but sometimes work and recreate on the Umpqua National Forest. So I'd be interested in the plant list for the Umpqua. Feel free to sign up, Madrone, and maybe next time people just want to hear more about the Umpqua plants too, Sean, if you, I don't know, do another outreach thing.
Well, what I would love to do is, yes, if anyone lives up there or wants to get involved up there, email Maggie or go to our website. We will definitely set you up. We're very interested in having, I just wasn't sure if we would have interest in this group. We're very interested in having people sign up to monitor up there, even if you want to drive from Medford or Ashland or whatever, but that would be fantastic. And what I'm hoping is maybe we can do this again, after the monitoring occurs, and we can actually share a lot of great photos of the monitoring that happens this year. And at that point, I would love to just have a presentation that's just all the fantastic flowers that we counted.
So I put a question in the chat. I was just curious if you could describe some of the deliverables that will result from this work. I'm familiar with it, but I could imagine there would be like some GIS stuff that goes to the Forest Service, summary reports, practitioner knowledge, etc. But I also wondered what the potential dissemination to volunteers and members of the public could look like.
Yeah, so we're going to model sort of an end of the year report or an annual report after other organizations. There's really fantastic similar programs in the state of Wisconsin, the state of Washington, other states. Citizens Rare Plant Watch, which is out of Portland State University, also does a similar thing. And some of those groups really have fantastic annual reports that go species by species and describe the state of the species and the populations that were visited, any threats that may be of concern, and then comparing this year's data to past year's data. So that will be an initial sort of quick and dirty, like snapshot in time, comparing it to a previous snapshot in time. Does it appear that any of these are declining? And we're hoping to make that into some sort of a report that's actually readable, like something that could be distributed to the public in general, as well as our federal partners. And then the future would be more statistically rigorous revisiting for at least 6 consecutive years so that we could establish what they call extinction risk for the most imperiled of these species, which is just a statistical method for establishing the odds that this plant really is declining and it's not just a fluky year that you just caught it on a bad year. So that is sort of the long-term deliverable. But this year it'll just be a report, lots of nice pictures and numbers and habitat descriptions and that sort of thing. As well as, I should mention, as well as the GIS deliverables, like you said, the way that we're setting up the form and especially the app, it will go directly into a database that we manage. And then I can export that directly into a format that can be put right into these federal databases without any further manipulation. And then the federal government can bring that up within their system and see, and so they can track it on their own. So that is a really important deliverable, that this just goes directly into their, it's very efficient getting the information into the platform that they use to track these species.
Awesome. That satisfies my question. I've heard about the back end of what goes into the reports and everything, but I can imagine the volunteers would have some satisfaction from reviewing the bigger findings. So Diane Newell-Meyer wrote, there are other plants that seem rare to me in the Cascades Siskiyou National Monument that are not included, including one that I found that has only 3 locations in Oregon, Brandegee's Spring Beauty, Claytonia saxa, and then also the subspecies of Lilium pardilnum variety shastens. And are these as rare or of concern? I'm curious if there are other plants that are or are not on this list. Maybe you can describe the prioritization process that you all went through with Forest Service.
Yeah, right now we're really focusing on ones that have been designated as Oregon sensitive by ORBIC, which is essentially a group of botanists and ecologists who get together every so often and decide these things. So this is sort of, I guess, the official list for the state of Oregon. Having said that, there's constantly new discoveries. There's more to find. A lot of the monument hasn't been surveyed now since some has been added. So, I think during the Obama administration, it was expanded and a lot of that hasn't been fully surveyed. So there may be plans for doing that. If you know of species, I'd say that we're most flexible in the monument just because of the partners that we have there, and the fact that we think we can do this. It's a smaller area too. There are fewer species rather than focusing on all of Southwest Oregon. So if you have species of interest that you think are rare enough to make that list, feel free to get in contact with us, especially if you're thinking that you would want to go out and collect data on them. Those do sound like they would be candidates to make a list, at least for our priorities. And again, in the monument, we're really focused on conservation of all native species in the area. So that might be a little bit different than looking at the entire, all of the national forests in Oregon versus just the monument. I think we have more latitude there.
Awesome. Madrone wrote in response, thanks, I will email. I work mostly on the Roseburg District BLM in Douglas County and Northern Josephine and Jackson counties, and may be able to request access to sites that are normally inaccessible because of gates, which is great. These are the kind of collaborations that I think we're hoping to form. And
Definitely.
then Thomas Hender wrote, I was going to ask how the app data will get input into the BLM GeoBob database, but that question was answered. Thank you, Thomas.
Yeah, that one, we will be working with your GIS folks to make that switch for the BLM in particular.
Yeah, I think that's it for our questions. If folks are still on the line and feel like just hanging around to chat for a few minutes, I think we have a few more minutes. We're coming up on 8 o'clock, so our timing couldn't be better for today. We often just go way over. So yeah, if you want to just say hi, folks, or now we can just sort of wind down as we do. Or ask your last questions, your last burning questions. I also had a question about like how many of these plants life strategies you're familiar with. I'm always curious why plants are rare. We had a speaker a few months ago that was pointing out some of the differences between relic populations and just things that are kind of globally rare or maybe are now expanding into new areas. Heidi Anderson says, thank you. Great. K Falls, perfect.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, that's a huge topic, but just very briefly, we have species on the list that sort of span the whole range of situations. Some of them might just be specialists on a certain type of soil, serpentine or something else. So they might just be limited in range and extent because of that. They just can only grow in certain soils. But within those sites, on those soils, they might be very stable because competition is lower. Others may be just a matter of circumstance where they are in their stage of evolution, how they've responded to a changing climate over the last several thousand years. They might have just found a refuge in this area and they used to be more widespread. Some of them might be currently expanding on a geological time scale, and they just speciated relatively recently, and we just haven't, we're living at a point in time where they haven't expanded that much. So those are all possibilities. Some of these species are rare for our region, but not necessarily in the world. There might be other places. Maybe they're really common in British Columbia, but they barely make it down to our area, only on certain mountain tops or something. We still want to know. We don't want to see them extirpated from the area, but they might be globally not as rare as some of the other species. And then some are directly threatened by human activity, climate change, maybe timber harvesting or forest management, wildfire exclusion or high intensity wildfire, OHV activity, poaching. There's all sorts of things, livestock grazing, invasive species. So there are species that are rare for all those reasons. Those are probably the ones that we want to focus in on after we sort of do this broad effort to survey a lot of different species. We want to focus on the ones that appear to be declining for reasons that we can maybe have some impact and we can help conserve or restore their habitat.
Great. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Sean. Sounds like at least a few people will be joining us, which is great. We look forward to seeing people in the field someday.
Yeah,
someday soon.
Yes. Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate the time. Really appreciate being able to make this meeting and share this program with you all.
Thanks, Sean. Look forward to being part of it. Great to see the interest.